What's up, guys? We are back from the dead. It has been a hot minute since we last spoke about the Florida Gators. It's been since last year, since we've last talked about them. Sorry, I had to make the joke. So happy New Year, Topher. We are a day late on the deadline. You can wish that according to Larry David, but I'm gonna say it anyway. Um, to any of my Curb Your Enthusiasm heads out there. Uh, but we're rocking and we're rolling, and the Gators seem to be doing the same. So Topher, first of all, how are you doing? And second of all, initial thoughts on the Gators 2024 season.
Yeah, I'm doing all right. New year, fresh lease on life, I suppose.
Oh yeah.
That's kind of the way to go about it. But yeah, I think all in all, you could say a success. Maybe not a rousing success, but a success nonetheless. Nonetheless for the Florida Gators football program 2024. Um, it was such a disaster that we had to start an emergency podcast series because of how bad it was. But by the time the season ended, there's nothing but hope, optimism, and 8 wins, which was kind of the high end of the hopes to begin the season anyway. So, yeah, fun
Yep.
times with fun players, and no reason to expect this can't be a playoff team next year.
Oh yeah. Yeah, the last time we talked was December 12th. So a lot has happened. It's been about nearly a month since we last spoke about the team. So, we kind of have a lot to get into. Where do you want to start? We could start with the bowl game. We could kind of get back to that and start with some other stuff. How do you want to do it?
Let's do the bowl game quickly. I know it's been like a month, so I don't want to belabor lost points, but that was simultaneously one of the most boring and one of the most fun bowl games of all time.
It was
Uh,
great. I mean, I was covering a high school basketball tournament here in Rapid City during the bowl game, and so I kind of had it on my phone, and I'd look over whenever there were breaks in the action or if there were breaks in between games. And yeah, for the first half, it really was like I'm not missing much. It's okay. Second half picked up a little bit, but I mean the team, they played pretty well. Got the big 33-8 win, I believe. So we'll take that. And I don't want to, wait too long. We've already been, that bowl game happened. Oh gosh. December
17th or something like that.
17th. So it's been a little bit. So I don't want to wait any longer. We need to give our flowers to the GOAT, Des Watson. Shout out King, going out, hitting the Heisman. I've been
Dude,
waiting to talk about this
literally
on this pod for so long.
the single greatest moment, maybe of my life following Florida, which is admittedly a short life, but when they put him in at running back, not at like we've seen like Ole Miss with their like defensive line quarterback wildcat package, putting him in at running back is so funny. It's literally the greatest thing Florida's ever done. Um, they gave the big man the rock. They let him rumble, bumble, stumble. It's a crime that they didn't give him the rock again near the goal line. Um,
It is
but it was
tough. It is tough that he opted to give it to son of U.S. Senator Marco Rubio, Anthony Rubio, but it's whatever. It is what it is. We are a Gators podcast, and but no, the bowl game was great. DJ Lagway looked pretty good. I remember talking to you about this like a while ago. DJ Lagway really is the ultimate like what do your eyes tell you quarterback because he had two picks that game. If you look at his numbers, like they're not the most impressive on paper, like 12 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, 50 or what? Sorry, 59.9% completion percentage. Like those are numbers that don't like light up a page, but I mean, just he's got it. He's got the juice. And I'm very excited to see what he can do starting a full season, knock on wood that he stays healthy. Um, going into the 2025 year. But yeah, bowl game, super fun. I mean, I try not to put too much stock into a bowl game, especially the fact that Tulane was kind of just battered. Like no Darian Mensah because he's transferring, and Ty Thompson is now was so bad at. I don't want to put words into Ty Thompson's mouth, but he was so bad that he is now changing his position to tight end. So
I remember on that note, just 'cause I think it's really funny, I remember during the week of the bowl game, there was like a media interview with John Summerall when he was talking about Ty Thompson. And I think they mentioned it on the broadcast where like there was an offer for Ty Thompson to stay in sort of like a Wildcat Taysom Hill role if he wanted to, but he entered the portal. And then you and I texted during the game. It's like, oh brother, you better get ready to learn Taysom Hill, buddy, because it's ooh
It
boy.
was not good. It was not good. I mean, give credit we've given like Florida was able to retain a lot of its roster for the bowl game. Like they didn't really have a ton of opt-outs, and so it was for the most part still the same defense that has been really solid towards the back half of the season. Um, but I mean, no, he was horrible. It was bad. It was rough. Like
Yeah.
I think he has a Felipe Franks future in him.
Yeah. But to the DJ Lagway point you were making, I was watching the game with my dad, who I haven't watched a ton of Florida football with him this year, but even him just watching, like, yeah, you see the picks or whatever, but he'll complete a pass where it's just like, yep, NFL arm, NFL, that's what it looks like. That is rare at this level. Um, Especially because we're also Notre Dame fans. So we've been watching like Riley Leonard this year, who does not have it in that way, in that very particular way. When it comes off his hand, it looks like an NFL quarterback. You can just tell right away. And I'm sure we'll get to like the with the transfer portal additions and other shenanigans in the wide receiver room, but I think things set up pretty well for DJ to have a really big 2025.
Yeah, I mean and I mean you look at some of like it was either On Three or CBS did like a way too early top 10, and they had Florida in the top 10, and some of that is like way too early. Let's try and get this attention because they're blue blood. I mean, Auburn was also in that top 10, but like, I mean, it's not totally out of the question. I mean, the team will go as far as DJ Lagway can take them. I mean, he is that special of a talent. And yeah, I think that kind of segues us into, you know, going from the bowl game into the off season, kind of the movements they've made. Do you want to start with the wide receiver room?
Yeah, I mean, might as well. I mean, I think it was either the last time or the second to last time we recorded a pod, and I was talking about potential receiver targets, and I think in the like 3 days after that, all of those guys signed somewhere else.
It was really unfortunate. The real it was like whiplash almost of just we go through all these targets, Florida's in with all of them, and it was just like Nick Anderson, LSU, and I'm trying to think just guys off the top of my head that we talked about.
It was the kid from Miami, the kid from
Yeah.
ECU. Hey, all those guys left. They did end up getting Cal legend, J.
J.
Michael
Michael
Ferdinand.
started. See, that's the thing. People forget he was like actually elite at Cal, and then he went to UCLA, and like I don't know what happened. I mean, maybe quarterback play was just not very good, and to be fair, though, he did have Dante Moore, your guy, for 1 year, and that was one of his worst seasons as a
Dante Moore just
collegiate wide receiver.
Dante Moore just forced a 5-star to transfer out. I'll have you know.
We know the truth. We know why Jared Kiwi really transferred back to Cal, bro. It's because a high school bully was no
Um,
longer there to beat him up. If you know, you know. I will not be expounding on that. Um,
but to the J. Michael Sternman point, he's definitely not as exciting a name as some of as a guy like Nick Anderson, like um, some other guys that we talked about in the portal. But he does have the physical and technical profile we were talking about. He's long, he's fast, he's experienced. Um, and to your point, he was really good at Cal. So there is talent in there. I know a lot of the draft nicks are pretty in on him as a guy with kind of day two upside. Um, and I think the exciting part is that it doesn't block the young players. They didn't add like a horde of like play now veterans. They added one guy to add a little experience, but otherwise it's the guys we recruited. Here's the keys to the castle. And I think there's a guy we don't know if we mentioned, but the Dallas Wilson
oh yeah, that happened. That
saga.
happened after the fact. So,
If you want to dive into whatever that was.
oh yeah, yeah. I just want to give one last note on J. Michael Sturdivant. Like you said, I think like obviously, I can't go into the mind of Billy and the coaching staff and the scouting department, but I think to your point, I think that was kind of just their idea of like, you know, he's shown flashes. Like he did have one really good season at Cal. He showed some flashes at UCLA. He is a very prototypical like NFL wide receiver build of someone who can just go up and grab a deep ball. Um, and at the same time, like from what he's kind of shown more recently, like we don't expect him to come in here and all of a sudden Trey Wilson is going to get buried in the depth chart because we added this guy. Um, but you have that experience. So, we'll see. I'd like to try and be optimistic. It is kind of tough watching that, and then you watch the bowl game with Caleb Douglas with Texas Tech. I mean, come on, bro, dude. Caleb
Dude,
Douglas is so good at football.
we joked about it, and then it's like, oh wait, no, he is exactly what we're talking about.
To quote who was it? I believe Bradley Cooper's character in The Hangover. Man, we fucked up. That's all I can say, man. That's all I can say. But
He
yeah,
is
no,
he is the one that got away.
he is. To the Dallas Wilson. Yeah, we didn't have the 8,000 layers of Inyan with Caleb Douglas to quote Past Lives, which I just rewatched. But yeah, the Dallas Wilson saga. So uh I guess we'll start day before signing day. Everything is pointing to him being a Gator. A lot of insiders are saying he's going to sign with the Gators. Um, DJ Lagway made the whole like tweet, and I don't know if it was an Instagram post too, but definitely a tweet with like him holding up an edited sign saying like we want Dallas. They were making a serious push for him. 5-star wide receiver was he committed to Oregon? And then yeah, so he's committed to Oregon. They're trying to make a big push to flip him and sign him to Florida. Um, Morning of everybody's thinking that he is going to flip, sticks with Oregon, signs with Oregon. It's very disappointing. We talked about in the last time we recorded how as great as the recruiting class became, like it was a very disappointing signing day, and he kind of led that charge just because he was the guy who, if they were going to flip anybody that day, it was going to be him, and it just didn't work out. And then give it a couple weeks later, he wants out of his national letter of intent. And then he says he wants to sign to Florida. And next thing you know, we got him. It is hold on. It's Gator time in for Dallas Wilson. So I'm rocking with that. We got our guy. So that was really cool to see. And we'll see. Hopefully amidst all the drama, he actually can live up to the hype and the potential and be something. I'm not expecting Jeremiah Smith. Uh obviously, but who knows? Maybe he can be a Cam Coleman type where he is electric immediately. Um, but we'll see. So yeah, I mean a lot of drama and sometimes that can not end well. Just look at Jaden Rashada and his college career now, back in the transfer portal after all the nonsense that went on with that, even though I think there is talent down there in there somewhere with him. It's just like sometimes is the noise just too much with all that kind of nonsense. Not to sound like an old head. Like I feel like this whole conversation, this whole rant I'm going on sounds like I'm a 70-year-old sports columnist. But I mean, I do think there's some truth to having this much around it, where it's like, okay, now you have all that pressure to really be that guy, and um, we'll see. Wide receiver is definitely an easier position because there are other guys in that room already who are talented, and he's not going to be expected to be the day one guy to step up. So that does take some ease off of it. And yeah, very, very interesting saga to say the least to, wrap you say a long story short. And I am excited to see what he does in the orange and blue.
Yeah, I mean, for Florida fans, it was a very we're so back, it's so over, we're so back situation. Um, but at the end of the day, it's a 5-star receiver. There were two 5-star, borderline 5-star receivers in this class, him and Vernell Brown. Um, I like that Dallas Wilson, again, like we were talking about with the transfer portal, he's a different build, a different player type to a Aiden Mizell, to a Trey Wilson, to a Vernell Brown, who are kind of the shifty playmaker types. Dallas Wilson's big bodied, fast, outside X receiver type. Like you said, he's not going to be Jeremiah Smith, obviously, but he's kind of that same physical mold, that same type of role, even if it's not quite to that degree, which I think is great, especially for a young guy to have to develop into that role. And, maybe he is greater right away. Maybe he's not. I don't know. But at the end of the day, it's a numbers game with talent acquisition, and you need to get as many good players in the door as possible so that you maximize your chance of hitting on them.
Oh yeah.
Um, and it may have been a shenanigans filled nonsense recruitment, but Florida won. Florida won a 5-star, big recruiting win, good recruiting class overall. I think the good vibes, optimism kind of kept on chugging
Oh yeah.
through the month because of that.
Because I mean, if you just look at the room, I mean, you have Lagway's the quarterback, and I know we kind of talked about this, but now it seems seemingly it's kind of filled out more. We have a better picture of it. You have Trey Wilson, Aiden Mizell, and Tank Hawkins as three dudes who are just pure speed, can just are wicked. Get them the ball in space or anywhere, just get them the ball as many times as you can, and they're gonna do crazy things with it. Um, and then you bring in Dallas Wilson. You bring in Vernell Brown, who Vernell Brown's kind of like that more speed style, like a Mizell. And then, you get something a little different in Dallas Wilson, as you were saying. And then you bring in J. Michael Sturdivant, who's going to be that guy who kind of can go up and get it. As that kind of skill set. And then you still have guys like TJ Abrams, see what they can do. Um, and then I remember, so Andy Jean has followed now to continued the Florida to Pitt pipeline. So shout out to that. Shout out to my guy, Andy Jean. Go be great, goat. And then I believe another Florida player entered the transfer portal in the wide receiver room. But are you aware of who that
I
is?
didn't the GOAT Marcus Burke
It wasn't, yes.
fly the coop?
Marcus Burke was this year's Tai Chow Kiao Bowman, I fear. So that is unfortunate. Hopefully he is a Ty and not a Caleb Douglas, or that would kill me a little bit. But it's fine. It's fine.
Hey,
So
I a philosophical note on the transfer portal. I actually really like guys like Marcus Burke, who go to a program forever. I mean, Marcus Burke's been here 4 or 5 years. You're a full program guy, you get the degree, you do your commitment. And if you have an extra year or two of eligibility, why not?
just
Go
do it. Yeah.
play at wherever, just kind of do your
So
thing. I love those guys.
does this mean K-Jack is back? Correct me
As
if
far
I'm wrong.
as as far as I know, I think he still has eligibility. I haven't seen him
He
enter the
definitely has
portal.
eligibility. I just, yeah, it's like it's hard to keep up. So I don't know if so. I mean, worst case, I don't want to diss KJ because he's cool, but like, worst case scenario is Billy does some nonsense with the depth chart, and all of a sudden, all these guys we're excited about get buried for him getting starter reps.
I
Um,
I would hope if that's the case, it just means K-Jack had an insane offseason.
I mean, you say that, but like K-Jack was getting playing time over certain guys this season, and it was only because of an injury why he stopped. Um, and so yeah, I mean the offense room is looking really nice, especially with a lot of offensive lineman guys coming back. Hopefully you get another year of development. Obviously, that's not always linear, but fingers crossed. And they were already pretty solid towards the end as they were showing improvement as the year went on. And so offense is looking very promising for next season. You're practically playing the same exact schedule again. So we'll see how those other teams change, but shaping up to be a pretty solid season offensively next year. Just kind of projecting. Defensively, uh, it's over. My honey reserves. I had to go back into the vault and I bashed all the pots. I was so angry, threw it all over the floor, all the honey. My entire apartment is sticky right now, because I've just was in such a violent rage, throwing my honey pots all over the ground. Uh, man, Austin Armstrong, why? If only he listened to this pod and knew how much I adored him and loved him as DC at Florida. I think that could have kept him. But alas, he's at Houston as their DC. A very interesting move that I don't 100% get because from all indications I could tell, it felt like he had a little bit more control of the defense as the season went on because they of how bad their start was. Maybe it really was more Ron Roberts, even though things that didn't work early in the season were kind of Ron Roberts' signature things, and things that kind of worked later in the season seemed to be Austin Armstrong's signature things that they used last season. Maybe it was the fact that he did get more control or like they did use more of his stuff, but he was still kind of getting babysat by Ron Roberts. I don't know. I'm not in that, I'm not, I'd love to be a fly on the wall of the coaching meetings and whatnot, but He's gone. So I don't know what they're going to do. I don't know if Ron Roberts is just going to slot in and be the only DC full time, or if they're trying to hire somebody else. That's really the biggest thing. I mean, if we're recording this on Wednesday, January 8th, and there's really been no movement really with the coaching staff. And not necessarily that they need a lot of movement with their coaching staff. I think they all kind of settled in into the positions and showed a lot of promise as developers. But like we've seen a ton of rumors about OC. Um, like I just said, Austin Armstrong left, so I don't know if they're going to try and fill that role or if Ron Roberts is going to take over. Um, so I'm curious on that end. So I'm interested to see what will happen, if anything. Um, Topher, thoughts towards that, both OCDC, just any coaching moves in general.
Yeah, I was definitely surprised as well to see Austin Armstrong leave for what is objectively a worse job. But that implies that there's some stuff going on behind the scenes that we're not privy to. And maybe it was, he was effectively relegated to like linebackers coach. You know what I mean? We don't know. It is what it is. Um, I guess I trust Ron Roberts to keep the ship afloat. I don't love saying that, but we'll see. We've talked about how much I love the other assistants, like the position coaches in that room, in that unit. So those guys are all still here. That's good. That's a good thing at least. We'll see what happens on the higher end because of that. I really need to talk about the offensive coordinator thing because I've tweeted this like half dozen times at this point. Florida fans need to stop clamoring for an outside offensive coordinator hire. It's going to make me lose my fucking mind. Like, no, no, you don't want Brennan Marion. You don't want Garrett Riley. You don't want Colin. No, 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 no. The offense is good. The offense is effective. And more importantly, the offense is tailored to the players that have been recruited to it. It's fine. Billy's doing a fine job. Russ Callaway is doing a fine job. Rob Sale's doing a fine. It's fine. It's fine. They're fine.
You're ready to learn quit Chris was it Chris Weiss? Is that who the Ole Miss OC is? Oh, what's his name?
No, not Charlie. We're not doing Charlie Weiss Jr., bro.
Charlie Weiss. I forgot he's just junior. Oh yeah. Oh, that's so great. Yeah, get ready to learn Charlie Weiss Jr., bud. Yeah, no, I agree. I'm very curious if they're because I mean to be fair, Billy did say that now they're just gonna what was the quote he said after the bowl game where it was like we're gonna take some time back to relax and I don't know how to tell you this, Billy, but bowl season, like this time of year, is the busiest of time of year if you are a college football head coach. So I don't know if still got his feet kicked up in Cancun or something, but we need Buddy to work and do some stuff. Because they do still need some positions of need. I don't know if they still need another defensive back, in my opinion. They almost had that in Adrian Maddox, and then he also had his own transfer saga of his own, going from Florida, he was at, I believe it was UAPB or yeah, and then he went to UAB, and then he was crystal ball to transfer to Georgia, and then last second ended up committing to Florida. That was going to be a massive get just because it's kind of like that J. Michael Sturdivant thing where I'm pretty happy with the DB room. It's not like they need to go in and make a Caleb Downs type move and get somebody like that. And obviously he's a safety, but you get my point. But you add in a really solid guy who's played a lot of snaps and he understands like how to be a SEC corner. And then next thing you know, next day he flips to Georgia. So how about that? So that was tough. Still need another defensive back for that room because they lost Jakeem Jackson to LSU, which if anything is mostly just tough for depth. Um, and then you lose
Yeah.
Jason Marshall to the draft. And then I believe Asa Turner. Again, he's a safety, but they're just corner depth piece. And then Trick Bridges as well is also declaring for the draft, but I think he was also out of eligibility anyway.
Yeah. To your point, I definitely think there needs to be a little more depth in the back end. I'm fine. I still would kind of like an upgrade at safety. I don't know if it exists, but Jordan Castell did not exactly build on his freshman season. Um, I thought the other guys were pretty good. Gates was pretty good on the star role. Thornton was pretty good as the strong safety. Um, Castell could have been better. And I don't know how I feel about the other guys in the room, but I know there's some talented freshmen. I think top 100 recruit for Mandarin high school was Stubbs, I think. He's like a top 60 player.
Yeah.
Maybe he's the guys out of the box. Um, I would have liked, and this Maddox kid from UAB, he could have potentially been that. Guess not. TBD if there's another guy that kind of fills that role. And then to your point about the corners, yeah, you kind of just need more bodies.
I mean, just we literally saw it this past season where it was like, especially that Georgia game where it's just like so many guys are going down where it's like, who's gonna even play corner?
I mean, there was a point where it was Trick Bridges, who was a safety playing corner, and Cormani McLean.
It's That's rough. I mean, Trick Bridges was he played he was pretty good. Like he really like in his one season as a Gator really kind of gave it his all. Um, so that was really cool to see. But
Real
like,
cult hero, future
yes,
cult hero, Trick Bridges.
exactly. But that's the thing. Like, based on Florida's track record of injury history, especially on the defensive end, especially in the secondary, like
Especially Devin Moore, let's be real.
especially Devin Moore. Like you just need guys. And like again, I'm not expecting like you get the top corner out of the transfer portal, the top safety out of the transfer portal, but like the guys like the Adrian Maddox, like you need guys like that. Like you need Trick Bridges is you need you know to get guys like that who can just plug and play immediately. And even if they're not going to be like your DB1, your CB1, they can come in and provide solid minutes, provide solid snaps, and uh, I don't know if Florida has that right now. Like you
Yeah.
said, maybe they do in some of these freshmen they're bringing in, but it's like I don't want to go full like you only can really build that depth through the transfer portal, but it's nice to be like we have a guy like Maddox, for example, coming in if Devin Moore gets hurt inexplicably.
And I think for the corner room, it might be okay because Cormani McLean, I believe he's going to be a full scholarship player, and like he showed flashes, so maybe he can take a step up in that room. Ben Hanks, I believe, another like top 50 prospect who signed, who could be a dude like right away as well for in corner. Um, it's really just like numbers, and I do think it could be a late portal ad, like a spring portal guy. Um, I think we could definitely see something like that. Because it doesn't, to your point, it doesn't necessarily have to be like a clear upgrade. It just has to be a guy who's played a lot of football and can kind of add depth and experience. And I think you can find a guy like that in the spring portal window. Um, so I think it's not necessarily a failure or like a miss. It's more just like a TBD, but it still needs to happen.
Yeah, and I mean, and just pointing, we've talked a lot about the secondary, but just kind of pointing to the other rooms too. Like a lot of the guys, like we've talked about, like we really full 180 on the defense from how we talked about in the beginning of the year to the end of the year. And a lot of those guys who contributed to that are going to be back. I mean, one of the good things about recording this podcast so late is that a lot of news happened. And so like Tyreek Sapp is announced he's coming back. Guys like him, I believe Grayson Howard's coming back. Um, and so, he's another key guy. Um, a guy like a freshman who's going to be a sophomore, Elgin McCray, is going to be back for another year, and he's a guy who I'm really high on. Didn't play too much, but he definitely showed flashes. A lot of guys who were kind of key contributors, uh, of a defense that really looked like a night and day better at the end of the season are going to be back. It's just kind of a matter of, okay, you lose guys, and whether they contributed or not, like kind of provided those bodies of a defense that really was pretty injury prone. You lose. We mentioned Jack Pyburn's at LSU too. Uh, you know, Justice Boone is gone, even though he didn't do much. He is a body.
CRC,
Um, what's that? Sorry.
CRC.
CRC is another guy. So it's just a lot of players that you're losing where maybe they weren't stars, maybe they were never going to be stars, maybe they were never even going to be like good. They were just going to be pretty good or above average. Like you still kind of need those players just as like your second and third string where your top guy goes down and it's plug and play. You are losing Big Dez to the draft. Cam Jackson is gone. Uh, Caleb Banks, thankfully, will be back. I believe, right? Caleb is back for another.
Yeah.
Yes. So Caleb's back. That's huge. But Cam Jackson's gone. Big Dez is gone. Searcy's gone. So it's like, where are you going to bring in these guys who can kind of not necessarily need to be an upgrade over that, but just can kind of plug and play immediately. And again, same conversation. Maybe it is some of these freshmen you're bringing in, but you'd like to see maybe they get another guy like Caleb Banks. But it's a wait and
Yeah.
see thing. So again, like you said, we'll have the spring transfer portal, and there is still some time. Just
And to the other point is that Florida's doing such a good job of getting, especially when they're building depth through the portal, is getting tier two, tier three guys that we're not thinking about. Like Caleb Banks didn't really play that much at Louisville. He was like a decently thought of guy, but he was a kind of stash and develop type of transfer portal guy that came around later in the cycle. He wasn't like a headline. Like Cam Jackson was a headline plug and play guy. Caleb Banks was like a we'll see what happens guy. And really the only guy they've added, I believe, in the portal in this kind of defensive line edge group is the kid from UMass, which maybe, I don't
we'll
know.
see. I
He could
mean,
be George Gums too. Why not, right?
exactly. You know what? You see UMass and it doesn't really jump off the page. But again, when Georgia Gums transferred, I did not know who Bro was. So and it worked out. He was really good. So there we go. And I guess, and something else I guess we kind of glossed over in the bowl game and kind of ties in this point is like maybe there are guys on this team still that we don't even know about. I mean, think about all the guys who are making plays I mean, we texted a couple of times where we would text each other being like, who just made that play? Who
Yeah.
is that? Who made that interception? Like, and some of that wasn't even necessarily Billy just emptying the bag of like, sure, Des Watson run, Anthony Rubio touchdown run. Like these were guys who were like playing in the bowl game as just like actual guys filling in for either opt outs or transfers and such. So, maybe there are guys on this roster who we are unaware of, who can come in and fill that role too. So,
Yeah.
that's always the biggest
Especially
thing.
especially on the defensive line. It's the same thing as the offensive line, where these are kind of the way Florida's doing it is really like to use an NFL analogy is like draft and develop. So there probably are guys who are true freshmen or redshirt freshmen now that only played in spots, but are gonna end up being like key players, like a guy like Dante Robinson, number 35. I don't know if I noticed him like the entire year, but he's one of the guys we're talking about. He made some plays in the bowl game. You see his build, you see his recruiting profile, and you're like, you know what? Maybe that's a guy. Um, and at this point, the staff has done enough for me to kind of trust their ability to identify and develop talent.
They are losing the go Jamarcus Weston though, so I don't think there's a replacement out there for him. So that's going to be a big blow. Um, I did not mean that as a dish. Jamarcus Weston is actually the goat. He is so sick. So real team player too, because they moved him around what like three times
I
for different positions.
I know he was officially listed as a wide receiver at one point,
He was an
officially listed as a linebacker at one point, and
he was an
officially
edge
listed as
rusher,
edge.
which is just like wide receiver with a stop in the middle linebacker to edge rusher is just like that's incredible. Real team player. I feel like most guys would probably transfer if you tried to ask him.
His only notable play as a Gator was that one like muffed kickoff against Alabama, but
Dude, he was elite. Trust. I'm gonna
he was really cool
I'll
and
build
really
the
good on special.
compilation. I'll build the punt Jamarcus Weston compilation.
The Gunner highlight tape is gonna go crazy.
Trust. Exactly, bro. He's gonna get drafted, bro. He's gonna get drafted like seventh round to like the Patriots and play on their special teams.
Mike Vrabel is just chomping at the bit.
Big dude. Exactly. Mike Vrabel would love a guy like Jamarcus Weston. Mike Vrabel, if you're listening to this podcast, you want Jamarcus Weston wherever you're going to be the next head coach of. You want this man on your football team, and he's going to be a steal because everyone else is overlooking him. It's like, hey, Mike, this is Jamarcus Weston. He's perfect. His only defect, he doesn't really play a position on the field. So that's my case to you, Mike Vrabel. Please draft our goat, Jamarcus Weston. But yeah, I mean, that kind of talks about, are there any notable moves per se, either in or out, offensively or defensively, that you want to kind of talk about that we haven't really touched on yet?
Not really. I mean, again, we mentioned it before, but the guys they lost, like, yeah, like TJ Searcy kind of sucks. Jack Pyburn kind of sucks, but it's nothing crazy. It's all been pretty good. And then the same thing with the incomings. It's like, yeah. Sturdivant's good. The kid from UMass could be something, but it's been pretty status quo. I think the comp for Florida roster wise right now might be like Penn State in terms of how they're building. Because Penn State's another program where it's like, yeah, they'll get a couple guys in the portal here or there. Maybe grab a receiver, maybe grab, a backup quarterback, whatever. But they're still just gonna, draft, develop, do that thing. And that's where Florida's at right now. And like, I think we're so used to Florida being bad that we want them to be splashier in the portal and get some bigger names. But it's kind of a trust the process situation. And man, if this bites me in the ass, I'm gonna be mad.
Hey, you gotta lay it out there, and I will build on that by asking you this. We are starting to see some of these way too early top 25 rankings. Again, January 8th, Wednesday, 2025 is when we are recording this episode. Do you want to lay out your expectations for this team, and B, do you want to give a record? It could just be regular season record.
I mean, yeah, why not? What is the point of January college football podcast if not to kind of speculate wildly?
Exactly. Also, real quick, do you remember who they opened the season with? I
I
have the
did
schedule pulled up.
I didn't until I just looked up the schedule to play this game.
Shout out our LIU Brooklyn Sharks, who we were actually just talking about.
Shout out the goats in their box gym.
Oh yeah, fins up, baby, fins up.
Oh, good heavens. But yeah, I mean, I mentioned it a little bit earlier. To be honest, I don't know if it's fair to say they have to make the playoff, but they should be competitive for it, at least, I would say. I think Florida next year should be like Ole Miss this year, South Carolina this year, at like the low end. You know what I mean? That should be the expectation. And then the hope is that you can be like Tennessee and make the dance because the schedule is gettable. I mean, LIU, South Florida, those are layups, non-con. All due respect to Byron Brown and the Alex Golish machine, but those are layups. Um, like LSU and Miami on the road are hard, but I'm kind of unmoved by LSU. I don't know what Miami's going to look like. Um, and then it's the same schedule, the same SEC schedule from that point on that was this year, except you get Texas at home this time. And there's no reason to believe Florida can't win 9, 10 games. I mean, I'll put a number on it and say 9-3, without figuring out who the nine and who the three are. But I think 9-3 is the mark, and that'll probably be right on the border for a playoff spot.
Yeah, that's what I'm very curious because I think Billy has kind of put himself in an interesting position. Because if this were still the 14 playoff era, the expectation, like you're laying out, is a 9-3. And I totally agree with you. I think that's very reasonable. And let's say they were able to do that, that would definitely not be a playoff contender like at all if it's the 14 playoff era. But that's like a top 15 team, depending on which of these teams is in the 9 team range or 9 win range. Uh, and you get a really good bowl game. But because the 12-team playoff era now exists, and because I'm very curious how the committee works now that we do the whole nonsense. I'm not going to get into it, but we have the whole nonsense dialogue about Indiana and SMU and leaving out Alabama and Ole Miss and South Carolina. I'm not going to get into that, but I'm just saying that has now created a whole thing. The committee is human and they have subjective opinions, even though they try to be as quote unquote objective as possible. Um, so that kind of opens the door for a team like Florida to now immediately jump into being a playoff contender. Uh, and if you do not meet that expectation, or if you're not like an Ole Miss, where it's like, okay, you're 9-3, and now we can at least like justify the season to ourselves by saying we got robbed, and we can point to all these numbers and say why we should have gotten in and why we got snubbed in the 13th or 14th ranking. Uh, and does that kind of create a situation for Billy where he is again on the hot seat? or even worse, like if it's another of this year, like obviously this season was good because the expectation was that Florida was going to go like 4-8 for some reason, and they ended up winning, having a great finish to the season, beating two ranked opponents in LSU and Ole Miss, and then winning your bowl game to go 8-5. But now the expectations raised, the bars raised. You're playing that same exact schedule again. Like, what is Billy's fate after year four, five, four? Uh, because again, like we were out of the ability to start the year. We were back. We are like fully back in now. But that doesn't mean his seed is now forever. Like he's fine. Like you do have to kind of keep this upward trajectory. And the fact that he's playing the same schedule that still includes some very tough opponents, it just makes me very curious, what the situation will be going into next year. Because you have DJ Lagway. And again, the sky really is the limit with him as your quarterback.
Yeah, and you make a really good point where like I mean it's year four. He this year went well enough that he bought himself time. He bought himself positivity. He flipped the narrative, but at the end of the day, in any coaching administration, really in any sport at any level across the country, year four is a prove it year. Like it doesn't matter if you're at Florida or if you're at Ball State, like you got to show something in year four that's like, okay, this is tangible. Because at that point, the roster is fully flipped with your guys. You know, you've had time to establish your culture, your ways of doing things, your player development models. Like, I mean, you look at the roster for next year, every player except for like Jake Slaughter, Austin Barber, maybe, was like a Billy guy. And honestly, Jake Slaughter might have been a Billy guy too. I might have my timelines wrong, but like,
I think Austin Barber might be the only offensive lineman who is
yeah.
a Mullen guy. I could be wrong, but I think so.
But to that point, it's like one or two guys here and there came from the previous administration. At this point, these are your guys. It's your handpicked quarterback. It's your handpicked, edge room. It's your handpicked staff. Um, like you gotta do it. And I think you make a really interesting point that with the 12 team playoff, it's kind of like playoff or bust almost, which is kind of crazy to say because I don't think Florida's like a national championship team next year by any means. But I mean, if we play the schedule game for a minute, like non-con is pretty easy. I mean, Florida State's kind of a mystery bag, but I think they're going to be like an 8-4-ish team.
You also get that game in Gainesville too, which
You also
helps.
get that game in Gainesville, which is big. Like none of these road trips except LSU and A&M move me at all. Like Kentucky has become a house of horrors, but they suck.
Yeah.
So I'm not moved.
Mark Stoops has given up. Ole Miss should take a step back because they're losing a lot of really key guys, including Jackson Dart.
Hey, we'll see former future Gator superstar Austin Simmons, baby.
The GOAT. Baseball season's coming up. I'm curious if he'll play for Ole Miss.
A little
Uh
Max Brown action.
oh yeah. Except he's actually good. Austin Simmons, that is. Yeah, and so that's because it's like I mean, you made that comparison to Penn State and kind of in that same vein where it was like for years, Penn State kind of had this same curve where it's like you're going 10-2 every year, and because you're better than 95% of the country, but you're not better than Ohio State and Michigan. And so it was okay. I mean, it wasn't okay. Like eventually, like obviously fans have grumbled for a while about James Franklin, but like objectively, he's been a good coach. I mean, you look at his record, you look at what he's done, like that's a good coach. And the fact that you are beating everybody else except for these two teams is still very impressive. Um, and so, but then it changed to a 12 team playoff, and it's like, okay, Franklin, you can still lose these two games, but that's no excuse now for you to miss the playoffs because now it's expanded. Like you have forever been the team that's been ranked fifth or seventh in that range or whatever. And and now that's the you're going to be in a playoff spot. So don't blow it. And he does what are they now? They're gonna go play your team, Notre Dame tomorrow in the is it that's tomorrow, right? Or is that the right? Yeah, tomorrow in the Orange Bowl. So uh again, I don't want to make the say that now Florida's basically just Penn State because they have definitely not been in that situation where they are beating everybody except like Georgia. But I mean, you're kind of building that direction. You're building a similar style team, and you know, I'm not expecting them to make a playoff run if they were to somehow make the playoffs. But sometimes, you get it. You get an easy path. Like I don't think a lot of people were picking Penn State to make the national championship, and you just so happen to get SMU in a home game, and then you get Boise State in the quarterfinal. And this Notre Dame team is very good. And I do think Notre Dame will beat them, but I think it's a close matchup. And I would not be, even though I am picking Notre Dame, I would not be surprised if Penn State beat them. And then what do you know? Penn State is playing for a national championship. And so, that's just kind of how things work that way, but you got to do the work to actually get there. Uh, and that's kind of maybe the expectation that's sort of been set up now with the 12-team playoff for Billy Napier.
Yeah, it's weird how nothing materially changes. Like Penn State is not materially different than they were last year, than they were the year before, than they were the year before, but just the circumstances around them of a 12-team playoff changes it all. Like literally they still haven't won the big one. They lost to Ohio State, they lost to Oregon. They beat I mean, all due respect to Southern Methodist and Boise State, they beat SMU and Boise State. Like, I mean, they've beaten Memphis in a New Year's Six bowl before. Like, that's nothing different. Um, but the circumstances changed it, and I think when we're transposing that to Florida, it's kind of just the expectation has to be to get there, and really what there is back to the Dan Mullen minimum standard.
Yeah, because I mean that's the whole thing. Because if you look at Florida and under Dan Mullen, like they would have been a playoff team, what, basically every year of his tenure, besides the last year that completely fell apart. And I don't want to say that as a like we need to bring Dan Mullen back. He can go have fun at UNLV. So shout out GOAT. But like you said, where it's like they were basically Penn State of the SEC for a while, where it's like they're really good. They're better than probably 90% of teams in the country, but they're not better than Georgia. And they're, not better than 2019 LSU. And, you know, they're not better than, I don't know, pick a random team that they lost to under Dan Mullen. They're gonna have a trap game against Missouri, but they're gonna be eighth in the country, and that's gonna be good enough for a playoff spot if it were a season now. And so again, the expectation is like obviously you want Florida to get back to where they were at the peak, where they were kind of running the sport for a couple whiles under like Spurrier and Meyer. But like because the circumstances of the sport have changed, you can be the 10th best team in the country. You can
Yeah.
be like the third best team in the SEC. And that's perfectly acceptable because you're going to be a playoff team. And then who knows there?
And I think that's a really good point is that when we're talking about what Billy can build it back into is before when he first got hired, the expectation was he had to build it into like 2021 Georgia or 2020 Alabama or like one of those peak Saban teams, but that's not really what college football looks like anymore. And that's not, and to your point, that's not really what you need anymore. Really, all Florida needs to do is build back to a more stable, consistent version of the Mullen era because the Mullen era fell apart because he stopped trying and the wheels kind of fell off the bus. If you can just build that level of success, but like sustainably, then yeah, you're gonna hit if you get the right quarterback. Maybe you can go on a run. You get the right bracket draw, you're gonna go on a run. I think we're gonna see that unless you are literally Ohio State and maybe just Ohio State, there's gonna be some ebb and flow. Like Georgia's probably gonna recede a little bit in the coming years. Texas, like who knows how high they're gonna ride. Like varsity Michigan, they dropped to 7-5, 8-5 this year. Like there's gonna be in this era of college football, not parity, but like a little bit of instability year to year. So you're not gonna build like a true dynastic run in that sense. Again, unless you're Ohio State, who's the most stable and wealthy program in the history of college football. Um, but if you can just be like between 8 and 11 wins guaranteed every season, we're good. And I do think Billy can get to that, and I think that starts next year.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the thing. And, uh, you know, I kind of lost my train of thought here, but just trying to think of like, uh, talking about that Florida. It's really like this perfect situation for a school like Florida, where obviously I hope this doesn't happen. I would love Florida to get back to the Spurrier Meyer days and run the sport if that's even a possibility somehow. But they're kind of gifted an opportunity where you could lose to Georgia every year for eternity. Georgia could win the next 50 Florida Georgia games, and Florida could still make the playoffs the next 50 years every single year because you can afford a big loss like that. You can afford even a second loss. Maybe some years you can afford a third, but like they're in that range where like, it was the Mullen thing. It was building up of like they have to be better than Georgia because if they don't win the East, they're not going to make the playoffs. You know, you have to be better than Alabama because you have to win the SEC to give yourself the best possible chance to make the playoffs. Uh, but now it doesn't matter. Like obviously you still need to be better than most of the teams. Like you can't be like seventh fiddle and then it's just over. But like if you're going to have a situation where Georgia is now, for as long as Kirby Smart is the head coach of that football team, is just going to quote unquote run the sport or at least the conference, that's okay. You can still make the playoffs every single year if you are being 10-2 and that one loss is to Georgia and say you still beat like LSU and Tennessee because you have your signature wins, 10 wins, whatever. And again, I'm not saying I hope that happens because that would really suck if they just lost Georgia every year for eternity. But I'm just saying now he is given a circumstance where that is frankly okay. And is that a good thing for the sport? No. But is it a good thing for Florida trying to get back and make the playoffs for the first time? Yes.
Yeah.
So
I mean, hey man, I mentioned Ohio State as like recession proof, like they're gonna be there every year. But like, man,
lost four straight to Michigan, right?
they
Is it
lost four
four?
straight to Michigan and they're still gonna win a national championship, and it didn't matter. You know what I mean? Like, is this what we want? I guess so. I guess it is,
Hey,
but
we're not making the decisions here. So,
yeah.
you gave your prediction. I will predict. Let me take a quick look. Let me play the schedule game. I'll go a step further. I will predict the schedule game by game. LIU Brooklyn. Unfortunately, to my Sharks, that is a W. USF dub. I will say at LSU. I'm gonna say loss because it wouldn't be a Billy Napier Florida season if there were not some early season shenanigans that made us rethink everything. I'm gonna think they beat Miami on the road. I think they get some revenge there just because they are kind of and I don't know, I have no idea what they are team. And their defense was terrible this year, and they had Cam Ward bail them out so many times, and they are not going to have Cam Ward. And I don't know if there's a guy they can bring in who is replicable of that. Versus Texas, that's a tough one because it's at home, but it's Arch. We'll trust the process. We'll trust that they cook Sark. So that's a dub. So we are at 4-1. I'm gonna say they beat A&M, beat Mississippi. No, I'm gonna say they lose A&M because that would be a very Florida thing to do, and I hate playing A&M. So 4-2, beat Mississippi State, lose to Georgia, and then you beat Kentucky, Ole Miss, Tennessee, FSU to go 9-3. Is my prediction.
I like it. The thing I just now noticed, maybe I've noticed this before, I don't know. Who who allowed LSU to be September 13th and Tennessee to be November 22nd?
Dude, no, that's I literally remember I told you about it because I was it's ridiculous.
Like,
It's so
what is
like
this, bro?
I know there's no divisions, but can we have some damn class? Florida's rivalry game with Tennessee is literally called the third Saturday in September.
Like, come on now,
Have
y'all.
we forgotten? Have
Like,
we,
they
lest we forget?
the only other times they played it that late in the season were 9/11 and COVID.
It's
Like,
ridiculous.
what are we doing, y'all?
I'm pretty
What is
sure, didn't they also play a late game because of a hurricane?
I mean, maybe, but once again, an act of God.
Yeah.
Uh,
It's actually sickening that they're playing LSU their third game of the season. It's really gross, honestly.
and why do we play A&M all the damn time?
Dude, I hate it. I don't know what that is about the SEC being like, you know who Florida needs to play? The Texas schools.
We
Like,
never play Auburn. Auburn's the closest campus to Gainesville.
It really does not make sense to me why A&M became our new like team that we're going to play a lot because like you just mentioned, Auburn's the closest campus. They used to be rivals with Auburn. Like that used like a lot of you ask a lot of Florida fans now, you'll say that Florida and Auburn are rivals and like maybe they don't like them and they'll just say yes, but like most people do not know that Florida and Auburn actually are rivals. But like it is up there like with Tennessee and like some of these others like SEC opponents. Like they like these are rivals, but they don't ever play. And then you look at Florida, Texas is like, okay, Florida has to play one of the new additions. Florida has beef with OU. Like Florida and OU kind of have like a storied history against each other. But the fact that they put Florida against Texas is the first team they're going to play. And I know it's going to rotate, but like I don't understand the schedule makers. It's very interesting. So, and then they get the two Mississippi schools. So cool. Uh, it is what it is. Topher, any finishing remarks for the Gators 2024 football season?
It was a fun time sometimes.
Oh yeah. And you know what? We'll take that. And you know, if Florida loses the season opener at LIU Brooklyn, we will be back with another hot board. Rhett Lashley, please save us. PJ Fleck, I hope you're cleaned yourself up from that mayo bath, brother. Uh, so yeah, that was great. I mean, Florida 8-5 finished the year, 5-3 in the SEC, I believe. Get a bowl win for the first time since 2019. How about that? So, been a minute. Pretty solid season. I mean, compare yourself to the rest of the state. I mean, UCF cooked, FSU cooked, USF is something. Miami talked all that trash, all that spent all that money at NIL, and
To
you
lose the
lost the
Pop-Tarts
Pop-Tarts
Bowl.
Bowl. So how about that? And your recruiting class finished lower than Florida. Uh, who else? Who else in the state? Hold up. FIU, I don't even know, bro. You're bad. FAU, also bad. Uh,
Fired coaches at both.
so I'm thinking flagship might be back.
Fellas, are we back?
We are so back. So that's great. Um, thank you to everyone for listening throughout the season, to our loyal listeners. Sorry for the long break. We were enjoying our holidays, and then I happened to get sick like 3 times in the past couple weeks. It was really great. I got pretty sure I got the flu, and then I think I had an allergic reaction to something. And then I got a stomach bug, which then turned into strep throat. So it was really great, but I have survived. I like I said, let me show one more time. It's Gator time, baby. So I had to I persevered and we are back. So I don't know when we'll record again. Now that the season is over. If there's some notable news, something crazy happens, if they actually do follow through and hire an OC, we will obviously be back to talk to about it. I know Topher will definitely have opinions on that if that were to happen. I'm not sure. Like I said, I don't know if they're going to hire a DC or just make Ron Roberts the dude. They'll probably just make Ron Roberts the dude. And then obviously there's going to be a spring transfer portal. But that is obviously a little ways down the road. It is winter right now. It is snowing. Well, it was snowing in Rapid City. There is still snow on the ground. That is still taking some getting used to for me. So yeah, thank you for listening. We'll be back at some point. Maybe we'll be back to talk some Florida basketball intermittently. Because they're balling. Shout out, big win over Tennessee. So take that, balls. Thank you for listening and peace.